Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another podcast. It is on YouTube, it is on Spotify, it is on Amazon Music, and today we're talking about the FIDE candidates. Now, today we're diving into one of the most important and most debated parts of the chess world, the candidates tournament. This is the event that decides who gets the challenge for the World Championship title, both Gukesh and Zhu Jiner. And it comes with a lot of history, prestige, and controversy. We're going to look at how the qualification system works, where it succeeds, and where it falls short. I'll talk you through the open section and the women's section as separate entities so we can keep it nice and clear and structured. Great. Now, on screen, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the FIDE candidates in terms of the open section's qualification. Now, the open section is seen as the flagship event to decide the challenger for the World Chess Championship, that being held by Gukesh Domoraju. Traditionally, players qualify through a combination of tournaments. A qualification or a combination. I'm recording a podcast and I can't speak English. Okay. Traditionally, players qualify through a combination of major tournaments, ratings, and now the newer FIDE Circuit. The positives are clear, right? It pulls together some of the world's strongest grandmasters, it guarantees drama, and it gives us a challenger who has proven themselves, to some extent, to be successful across formats and events. In theory, they are the best challenger. But the problems each year are becoming more and more visible. The FIDE Circuit does not just include classical events. They also include rapid and blitz tournaments, which don't reflect the necessary skills to win a classical world championship, and this unfairly rewards some players who may be better in faster time controls. Another issue is that many of the qualifying events or the heavy point scoring events for the candidates, not even like the qualification to get to the qualification for the candidates, they're invitation only tournaments, or they invitation only tournaments contribute bigger points towards things like the FIDE Circuit. That means players who are already well connected or established can have more chances to score big, while maybe equally talented players outside of the invitation loop have fewer opportunities. The system often ends up rewarding consistency in who gets invited rather than raw merit across open events. So while the candidates is the jewel of competitive chess, its qualification system is not perfect. It risks favoring players who with access to elite circles and those who excel in formats that don't truly match the classical challenge ahead. Remember, the World Championship is a one-on-one match. So we go through it. Fabiano Caruana wins the 2024 circuit and qualifies. The 2025 FIDE Circuit winner will also qualify. We've spoken a bit about the problem with the circuit. It includes rapid and blitz events. Some of the strong closed events, because of the average rating, contribute more points because they're a better score. Because in theory, you did really well against really high-rated players. That means opens get scored a bit less, where some players are more likely to play. The World Cup, which is a knockout tournament, it's very grueling, so you have to be very, very good to win it. And the top 3 qualify from that. So 3 out of 8 come from the World Cup. The open one to be held in October/November. The women's one already been held. We'll talk about it a bit later. But it's a knockout event. It's not like a one-on-one. It's not a round robin. You lose, you're out. So you can see very much we are rewarding winning. We're not rewarding maybe not losing. We're rewarding winning. You have to win, which is a positive. It definitely is a positive. Same with the Grand Swiss. 2 players come through from the Grand Swiss. The open section and the women's one will be held simultaneously, I do believe, in Samarkand. Or no, is it Samarkand or is it the Isle of Man? I'm not sure, but it's September 3rd. That's all I know. The top 2 qualify from there. And again, rewards winning. You have to score really, really well in, I think, the 11 rounds or 13 rounds of classical chess to win. And then, of course, by rating. The rating spot is always a bit contentious because some of maybe the top 5, 6 players, the top 10, depending on what's going on in the world, you can very easily keep your rating. You just have to play enough games. Like, it was so funny last year, the race for the rating spot, because Linnea Dominguez Perez, his rating got up and suddenly he was nearly there. It was a couple rating points off. So he flew and played a couple extra tournaments, and it didn't go well. He made a couple of draws, but he was playing a couple of opens, so that lost him rating, so he withdrew and left. I think Alireza Firouzja was also worried about rating, so started playing some random tournaments in France. They organized him like a 4-player match against some older French grandmasters. He gained rating, but not quite enough, or he ended up losing like a rating point or 2 because he went 6 out of 6, and 5 out of 5 would have actually been better had he not played the last round, which was so strange. So then he went to some random like festival in the middle of France, which was interesting. But the rating spot's always contentious at times because it's maybe not the best player who's on form. It's just the player who at the time happens to hold the highest rating, which in theory makes them the next best player to not qualify, but it's not always in practice. Like this year, spoiler for the future, it's probably going to go to Hikaru. Probably, because Fabiano has already qualified. The 2 Indian players, Gukesh is the world champion, and Arjun will probably qualify either through the circuit, or he might get the Grand Swiss, or he might get the World Cup. If not, he's going to challenge Hikaru for that rating spot. If you're looking at the top 3, Magnus is not there. Fabi's already qualified, so he won't take it. It's up to Hikaru. Gukesh is the world champion, and Arjun out of the top 5 at the moment. But that doesn't mean someone like an Alireza or a Prague or someone else from slightly below them, a Wesley So, an Anish Giri, can't challenge them, particularly if Hikaru hasn't played enough games. And all of a sudden he has to play more games to get that spot. So we'll see. He may not even play the candidates. So it's just very interesting going through all those 8 spots. Let's now talk about the women's section, where you can see a couple of differences. So I'll start with some general thoughts about it before we go through each of the spots. The women's candidates works under a very similar framework. The qualification process mirrors the men's, with all the open, not the men's, with spots coming from events, ratings, and the circuit system, or a circuit system. Here again, there are the same positives. It's a clear pathway, it showcases some of the best women in chess, and it keeps the Women's World Championship cycle alive with structure and visibility. Sometimes it's good that these events are held by themselves because it gives lots of focus towards them. Sometimes it's better that they're held at the same time, probably logistically, and you get lots of crew and stuff there. So it can be covered properly, as it should be. And I'd like you to just remember, the women's candidates have not been around forever. The Women's World Championship was never always a 1v1 match. A few years ago, 7 years ago, 2018 or so, it was a knockout. They frequently have held it as a 64-player or a 32-player knockout. So, this is a big win. Going through each of the spots, we see a couple of differences, which is something I'll talk about later, but I'm not a fan of it. So they've got this Women's Grand Prix series, and if I scroll down, you'll see it's 6 events, and then the top 2 players, who we already know, with 2 events still to go, qualify. So again, rewards winning and consistently winning. But again, these events, they're not opens. At least to my knowledge, they're not opens. Sorry, I need a sip of water. Sorry, this is the third time I've tried to record this podcast. My throat is giving me haywire. And my audio equipment, I hope this one works. If it is, you're hearing this, drop a thumbs up or a subscribe or just tell me you're listening. It'd be great. Anyway, so we already know who's won it with 2 events to go. But these aren't opens. I think there are like 10 players. I might be mistaken on the number of players, but they're not opens. So a player might perform well in one, but not be able to play the next 3. And then all of a sudden, you've only played half the events. You're not going to perform well. So it's interesting. We've spoken on the YouTube channel. If you're listening to a podcast, we did a video, or I did a video, on the finals of the Women's World Cup, which was won by international master Divya Deshmukh, which is one of the great stories coming out of the World Cup. I hope we get something similar with the men's, or the open one. It's unlikely, but it would be a great, great story. So she wins, she gets the Grandmaster title, she qualifies to the candidates. Humpy Konaru qualified through second, and the runner-up, Tanjani, the Women's World Championship runner-up, finishes third. That's what I do like, one of the changes they've made for this year. Just because you were runner-up in the previous World Championship does not give you that spot back. So Ding has not qualified because he was runner-up. He would have on some of the older systems. And then we've got again the top 2 for the Swiss and the FIDE Women's Event Series. Now this is something we need to talk about. It's similar to the circuit. You can see the information on screen for the benefit of the podcast listeners. The FIDE Women's Event 2024-2025 is the series of top FIDE Women's events. Players are awarded points based on their performance in these events as per some table, with players ranked like on the average of their best 5 results. So your 5 best scores in these events are averaged, and then the player with the top average score across their best 5 events wins it. So it's very similar in principle to the FIDE circuit that the open section is using, which Fabiano Caruana won the one for last year, and someone will win for this year. I'm not going to tell you who the front runner is because it's irrelevant, because I looked at it beforehand, and you've got like Ding, who's like in 5th place, but his only event is the World Championship, which he scored quite well in, because it was a draw, and you get double points for it, I think, or at least in the women's one you did. But then there's people with like 1 event, or there's like Prague with like 4 events, Tata Steel, Norway Chess, this the tournament, and that tournament. So it's very interesting. Now, I'm going to say this once, for anyone who's listening, for if you want my take on it. It's not my place to decide what's best for women's chess and to ask or dictate or say what they should do about merging it and getting rid of women's titles and getting rid of women's only events and stuff like that. That's a question for the players, the federations, and to some small extent, the broader chess community. If you want my opinion on it, I don't have one. I really am not qualified to give one on that. What I can say is that both the systems for the candidates share the same structural issues. They both risk rewarding the wrong skill set, speed chess versus classical chess or something like similar, and they both can favor insiders versus outsiders. It's not always the case, but we want the best 8 players in the world at that moment. Divya Deshmukh just became a Grandmaster. Is she one of the top 8 women's players in the world at the moment? She's playing well. Whether combined or separate, the system itself should benefit from reforms that emphasize true open qualification, fairness, and consistency with the classical format. Look, the Candidates remains one of the most exciting events in chess, but it's also one of the most flawed in terms of how players actually get there. For both the men's and women's cycles, the over-reliance on rapid and blitz to some extent, and the heavy weight of closed tournaments means there's not always guaranteed to see the absolute best challenges come through. That said, it's still a spectacle. It still creates legends, and it still gives us those unforgettable moments when someone earns the right to play for the ultimate crown. The question going forward is whether FIDE will keep the system as it is, or whether pressure from players and fans push them towards a different way, a different path, a different system. I'd love to know what you think down in the comments below.